Whenever you are raising kids, one of the biggest obstacles that you will run into so often with little kids and big ones is anxiety. There's so many things that kids and parents get anxious about, whether it's school, if it's food, if it's new activities or new adventures that you want to go on. And so many times, I think as parents, we're confused about how to handle anxiety. I know in the old days, it was kind of just like shove the kid towards it, almost like throw the kid into the pool, he'll learn how to swim. And then other stuff parents have done, they just backed away altogether. And then the kid never seems to face their fears or their anxiety. But I want you to know there's a different way to approach it. And that's why we wanted to bring on Dr. Tamar Chansky. She is the founder of the Children's and Adult Center for OCD and Anxiety. She's helped thousands of children overcome fears, negative thoughts, and OCD. Dr. Chansky is committed to helping children, teens, and adults understand and overcome the tricks the mind can play. She's the author of several books. Some of my favorites are Freeing Your Child from Anxiety and Freeing Yourself from Anxiety. So she's written a great book for parents as well. So I want you, if you're seeing this at all, which I know you are, if you're a parent of kids of any ages, you're seeing anxiety pop up in all different types of ways. Well, she's going to help you have specific strategies, specific tips on how to get better at having the conversation in your family about this feeling that seems to disturb so much of our hopes and dreams for our kids. So sit back, take a moment, and get ready to learn how to better handle anxiety in your family today.
Welcome to the Art of Raising Humans.
The Art of Raising Humans is a podcast designed to support, equip, and encourage parents on how to create long-lasting, deeply connected relationships with their kids that's free from fear and shame. Come join us on the journey. Hello, and welcome to The Art of Raising Humans. I'm Kyle.
Hi there, I'm Sara.
And Sara, right now, so many people in this kind of tumultuous world, there's so much crazy stuff going on. We're seeing so many parents who are confused on how to handle the anxiety that their kids are feeling.
Yeah, there's a lot of worry, a lot of fears right now.
And I know throughout our time raising our kids, there's all different moments where they have felt anxiety in different ways, whether it's food anxiety, whether it's anxiety about going to sleep, whether it's our own anxiety that they won't go to sleep or they won't eat the food. We've definitely experienced all different types of anxiety. And I know we've read a lot of different books about it, but one of the books that I love the most, I'm going to show our audience on YouTube right now. And if you aren't watching us on YouTube, get over there. You should be doing that. But one of my favorite authors, Dr. Tamar Chansky, has a book called Freeing Yourself from Anxiety, and that's for adults. But an even cooler one when you have kids is Freeing Your Child from Anxiety. And this is just two books that she's written. She's written several others more specifically about OCD and about other topics like that. And so we thought, let's get her on the podcast.
Yeah, it's an exciting day.
Right. So without further ado, Dr. Tamar, I want to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Now I'm curious, why are you so excited about writing about anxiety? Well, what was it that drew you into this topic?
Like you said, right now, there's so many things that, the world is going through, right? And we are here trying to help ourselves, our families, the folks that we work with, but it's kind of always been that way, right? Yeah. I think about the headlines of the age of anxiety recently, but since I've started doing this work, those have been the headlines, especially for kids. So partly, I think that's a reason to stay in here and keep trying to help people understand what the process is of what happens when you're anxious, when your child is anxious, and head the direction that may be kind of counterintuitive, which is not just to swoop and rescue. There's nothing wrong with that. We're wired for that. But in the long run, and even in the short run, we want kids to be able to, talk about their fears and anxieties, fact check them themselves, with our help kind of scaffolding along the way so that they learn how to not be afraid of their own thoughts and feelings and really
Yeah.
see, kind of put things in perspective and what they can do to help themselves. So I stay stay in this work because
Yeah.
I love it like you guys do too,
Yep.
right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, there's just so much that we can learn, but we are wired to not do that. We're also wired to
Yeah.
learn, but it's sort of like our second instinct is to do that. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, almost it's like our first instinct, like you said, is to just either run away from it or, just kind of rescue our kids from it. We just want to get away from it. But I think learning about it is so important. So if you could take a moment and kind of define what is anxiety.
yeah. So fear, is again wired in. We need to be afraid of things because we have to be able to keep ourselves safe. If we didn't have that wiring, we would not, we would not be
Mm-hmm.
here today, right?
Yep.
But anxiety is sort of the extra layer of interpretation, prediction, looking ahead, and looking ahead not like with excitement, but with
Yeah.
fear, worst case scenario, kind of the spiraling and predicting of negative outcomes, which is, can really be dysfunctional because maybe there are some things we need to do in the present that would be helpful to prepare, for a test, for a new situation. But with anxiety kind of left unchecked, we're just going to feel so overwhelmed that we
Mm-hmm.
might even, opt out of things. And, our kids too, just really coming to us distressed, like, I can't go to soccer tryouts or I can't
Yes.
do this, I
Yes.
can't do that. Because why? The situation? Not so much. It's really the narrative of what their thoughts are telling them about that situation. And that's really the, kind of place of change that we can, by not being afraid and to go in and not just correct and say, this is how you should see this. But can we just say for a moment, isn't that what we all want to do?
Of course. Oh, yes.
Only
Yeah.
that
Yes.
worked.
Yep.
So we can't do that. But what we can do is say, we can empathize and say that, I get why that feels so scary. If I were thinking those stuff,
Yep.
I would feel really scared too. Let's take another look. What's the scariest part? What's your brain telling you about this? Do you have another idea about it? Can we fact check it? And, that whole thing could just take seconds or minutes. It's just about it's not like a long drawn out thing. Just knowing
Yeah.
to head in that direction rather than away from, what your child is afraid of.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking of. I know you talk a lot about this in your book, but how is it that you frame fear and anxiety for your child? Because that, to me, you see kids, they're just like big eyed,
Mm-hmm.
they're feeling it all over in their body. How do you help them to look at and like, what is anxiety? What is this fear? How do you help kids as a parent, kind of, how do I help them understand what's happening right now and what this is in a way that's, I want to say, healthy, but you're just feeling this, I'm scared, run away, but how do you help them kind of shift that and look at it?
Yeah. So important to sort of think about. The first step is really, if we really think about what state the body is in when we're afraid, it's not a time to do careful assessment of details, right? We are wired to run or fight. That's not like read the directions. So the first thing is just really understand. I think the more we understand that, even about ourselves too, that we might, with empathy connect, but then just take a second to, rather than rushing in with a lot of questions and information, might say like, I get why you are feeling so afraid. If you're thinking that, let's just take a second. I really want to look at this together. And that's kind
Yeah.
of might seem like that's a throwaway phrase. Like what is that?
Would be.
Except not having a lot of information at first actually gives everyone a chance to exhale. And that exhale brings us more into our recovery mode where we could then do the careful sifting and kind of looking at the details. So, we are such evolved and refined and complicated beings, but at the same time, we're not.
Yeah.
Just so not, when you were saying, Sarah, you used to see the look of fear on your child's face or something like that. Let yourself respond to that by just like, okay, I see how overwhelming this is. Let's just take a second. I really want to talk this through with you. And just those sort of that contracting, that connection helps everyone downregulate. And that's going to help. Then the next steps are really about finding out what your child is thinking and the way, kind of simple things that you can say to, you don't have to go into a whole like neuroscience explanation, but you might say, so there's a part of the brain that just, it always tells us what could go wrong. What's that part saying? You could say
Yeah.
that to a 4-year-old pretty much,
Yep.
a 16-year-old, a 56-year-old, so it's kind of as simple as that. But we do want to get those two tracks going. So we might say, what is that part of your brain saying to you? And then what do you think of that?
Mm-hmm.
What does
Yeah.
that sound like to you? Does some of that sound true? Some of that not sound true? So it's so humbling, I think, and interesting that as much as we want to give the direct correction, and we all do, we do this work all day. It doesn't matter. We still want, we know that that's not going to be helpful, but that is our instinct, that it's just giving kids agency by asking questions. What do you think about that? How does that sound? Does that remind you of something? Or, if you were taking a test on that at school, would that be the right answer? What do you think? So it's not sort of, why are you worried about that? That doesn't make sense. You're really making the worry kind of that third party to say, asking your child to say, what do you think about what worry is telling you? Of course, it's trying to protect you. Do you think, do you need that kind of protection in this moment, or you need something else?
Can you say that again? So what do you think about what worry's telling you? I love that kind of self-reflective question, but I don't think any parent I know is asking their kid that, right? But it sounds like they're what you're doing. Yeah, I know. Hopefully they will. Yeah. What do you think?
If you take one thing away.
Yeah. What do you think worry is trying to tell you there, right? So then what I hear you saying there, it's kind of teaching the skill to reflect, to be curious, but also there's this sense of differentiating yourself or separating yourself from the worry. Like the worry isn't you. The worry is a feeling that's trying to say something to you. So be curious. What's it trying to say? And then you add it on. Maybe that worry has helped at times, but is it helping you now?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That was
Yeah, no, that was great. No, I was trying to unpack it there because you said it so quick, and I really wanted our listeners to hear that I know it might sound strange to talk that way, but it really is so helpful to kids because then it's almost like they can befriend those feelings. They don't have to be scared of them. Worry doesn't have to be an enemy. Anxiety doesn't have to be their enemy. It can actually be something there that's just there to talk to them, So I would ask you, what would you add? There's so many families, kind of building upon what you're saying, so many families I'm seeing right now who maybe they didn't have these skills when the kids were little, right? And now the kids have grown up and they are not friends with their anxiety. They very much have seen it modeled by their parents or other adults that anxiety is not something you want to befriend. It very much has been something they don't talk about. They try to avoid as much as possible, whether it's on their phones, by watching TikTok or whatever it is. They try to get away from it. And now when push comes to shove and they're teenagers and life is actually getting so much more anxious because they're having to make big decisions like, where am I going to go to college? How do I pass this class and get the grade to get that scholarship and so on and so forth? What I have seen, and this is not just with one family, but many families, the kids aren't even going to school. They're so anxious they'll miss a couple days because they thought they were going to fail that test. And then once they've missed those couple days, then they get anxious of the thought of going back, and then everybody asking them why they missed. And then it just starts to snowball.
Like compounding.
Yeah. And then pretty soon the parents at first are kind of doing what you're saying. They're like, this is easy to solve. Just get out, go talk to you. And then all that information even like snowballs the anxiety more to where now the kid isn't even coming out of their room or things like that. So I've just said, when you see stuff like that, what's some kind of answers or some things to help those parents? I mean, lots of what I'm doing is trying to encourage them and being like, hey, let's stay the course, keep connecting with the kid, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Exactly. And I think that's such it's such a poignant example of just the stress that kids are under, their interpretation of what they need to do, many feeling like they couldn't ask for help early on, or they couldn't get a bad grade. What is a bad grade?
Yes.
But do perform as well as they'd like, and that would be so bad that that's the thing to be avoided. When really it's like we want kids to feel like there is just much more of a landing pad and room for just being human, your podcast. Because none of us perform perfectly ever. We're trying to optimize how we perform. So anyway, just to say, it's so broad. These challenges just affect all students. It's like, if I think about this, I will answer your question.
Oh, I know you will. I'm waiting for you.
I do, but
I will.
I was thinking about how just when I don't know, I'm older than you, but when I was in school, the word stress didn't exist. It wasn't like we didn't have problems or whatever. We didn't talk about that, Then it started to work its way in. If you asked students now if they were stressed, they would just look at you like, are you breathing or something? Like, of course. So I think that's sort of the situation that all kids are facing, and really is why we need to be having these conversations as much as possible. So all is to say, if parents are at the point like you were just describing, where it's just, there's sort of a shutdown, because now, in a way, you could say there is a reality component to those fears, because they have to catch up. They have to have answers to what their friends are going to say. But you know what? All of those things can be solved. A lot of times, if you just are willing to go into the nitty gritty about, say, with friends, what, they just, when they say, well, where have you been? They don't want a dissertation. There is just one line you need to fill in, whatever it is. I was really having a hard time, which these days, no one would blink an eye. Like, that would be the answer that everyone, all your colleagues in high school, would understand that. Then the brainstorming with the teachers about how to catch up and things like that. But I think that, as you were saying, going in with empathy and just saying, look, there are times that just feel like you can't fix, they're unfixable. Things it's in a normal life, in the course of life, competent people can have that feeling. That is a feeling, that's a thought, so if you're feeling overwhelmed, that doesn't mean this is impossible, but it means it feels that way. When you're ready, and just sometimes kids just, think about teens, they want to feel normal, whatever that means. So just already they may feel like, well, the way, everyone's stressed out, but the way I did it was wrong. Like, no one did it like me. So just really parents doing that kind of containment and connection to say, if it feels like, just so overwhelming, I get it. And that doesn't mean we can't, figure this out together. then you're really, so, hopefully then everybody exhales a little bit. It's like, oh, okay.
Yep.
They're not just going to say, why didn't you tell me, you know, last month
Yep.
that you were having these, or whatever.
Yep.
Not the time for that.
Sure.
But then really trying to get to what I think of as the gems. What are the hardest parts? Like, what is that youngster, that teenager
Yeah.
thinking of? I can't make up that chemistry work. Okay, that's one. You just start to get the
Yeah.
projects. Then you
Yep.
might say, okay, which one do you feel ready to talk about? Or what, sometimes when you just start listing things, things feel more manageable because again, if we think
Yep.
about the nervous system, when we're overwhelmed, we're just, not in thinking mode. When we can have someone help us down regulate and start to name things, okay, then we're up in our thinking part. Then we can be problem solvers.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you give, because you're talking right now as you're talking about that, the nervous system, and I've seen so many times, even in my own kids where they're clearly very dysregulated, their nervous system is just haywire. What are some things as a parent you can look at your teenager or your child and just, you can see it, for starters, we need to calm your body down, what are some things, because you try to have that conversation, and there's oftentimes I feel like I jump into that too early, and I'm like, oh wait, well, they're not even calm yet. And I'm like, so let's pull this apart. But what are some of your favorite ways that parents can go to their child and just kind of help them take that deep breath and help them down, calm down regulate, get their nervous system into a better state?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think one uh, important way of starting that process is the framing and making it a we thing instead of a you
Yep.
thing.
Yeah.
Can we just take a second? You might even say, I need to take a second. Don't want
Yeah.
your child to feel on the spot, and you're bringing your kind of calm energy in. That's going to be helpful, but you might just say, like, can we just take a second? I need to exhale for a second. Then there's some mirroring that happens
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
You don't ask them that they have to do that, but you're showing them, and you might invite them, when I'm feeling that way, sometimes it just really helps to like sigh like that. Or, when I'm feeling that way, sometimes it helps just to, put my hands on my chest and just, go back and forth like this, like butterfly breathing, and help. It just helps me to feel calmer and then I can think clearly. Do you want to try that? Again, you're sort of offering instead of telling. And that's going to also help a child, certainly a teenager, but even a younger child, just feel like they have some agency, they're in charge, that will feel better. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it sounds like what you're doing there is kind of inviting them into it through the we, and if there's still some hesitancy to dive into it, then just do it yourself. Just you start doing the activity. I know many times what we did, even we would ask the kids to take some deep breaths with us, or do some other kind of calming activity. And especially when they're little, there would be resistance. No, I don't want to do that, because they kind of don't want to let go of
Right.
it. And then I'll say, well, I need to do it, so I'm going to do it. And then pretty soon they would end up sitting on my lap, taking some deep breaths with me. And I just say, hey, just feel my chest against your body, right? Just feel that. Just match it. Just match what I'm doing. And a lot of times then they find that kind of intriguing, because it's kind of like a game.
Yeah.
Like we're matching each other and trying to mirror one another. And that seems to help, because it kind of gets away from the you against me, or me trying to control your anxiety, or trying to stop you from being afraid. And I think many times that's actually what parents are trying to do. It's not actually calming the body. It's just stopping the kid from looking at, like they're scared.
Yes, exactly. That made me think of one, the soft sell. Absolutely. That's a great approach. But, sometimes it is the calming that is a helpful direction. Another, so sort of slowing things down. And sometimes kids need to move. And that is another way of down regulating the nervous system. So you might know your child, that they do better when they're, if you said, look, we can sit here and just, I need to, slow down for a second, but we could do that here together, or we could go walk the dog. What feel, or do you have another idea? So just moving can also kind of burn off that adrenaline. And sometimes that's more helpful for some kids. So just some, another choice to put out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. That's a really good point, because I think we do, or at least I do as a parent, often think, oh, we've got to, let's bring everything down. But how often that actually would help to get some movement going, with your little,
just putting that, it's really human to human. We all are sort of built the same way, but so this works for some people, this works for other people. What do you think? What feels, like what you would like to do?
Well, then another question we're really interested in hearing your thoughts on is, a big part of what we want to do with our kids is probably when we were growing up. Like I remember being at an amusement park with my parents, and I was anxious about the roller coaster because it had some loop-de-loops in it, right? And I was scared to death of this. And my dad was like very serious. He's like, "You're riding this roller coaster. If you don't, then you can just go home," or something like that, And it was like this all or nothing. And I remember, in my child, I did write it, a lot of tears. I did write it, but then I loved it, So then part of it was like, to my dad, he's like, "Look at that. It worked," right? This is how you help your kid overcome their fears, is you just threaten them with a bigger fear, and then that will help them face that fear. So and having kids, we're like, I don't think we want to do that. But we did notice at times, and with people, other people, who are wanting to parent differently than that kind of authoritarian style, is they really struggled on helping their kids face their fears. It ended up being like the fears and the anxiety seemed to control their kids, and they don't know because they don't want to push them into the pool and say swim. What's the other option for those parents when they're like, I want to help them do that. I don't want to just say, "Hey, if you're scared, don't do it." But I also don't want to shove them into it.
And let's just say, Kyle, that was lucky that worked out.
Yes, that's right.
Because I certainly have had some other kids who come in, and they're like, "I am never doing that again. My parents made me," okay, so that worked out.
Well, that's Brussels sprouts. Yeah, I was made to eat Brussels sprouts. I've never touched them again.
I'm so sorry, because they're so good. Maybe, Sarah, I don't know how you feel about it, but it might be
I'll
a
eat 'em.
desensitization process that could get it done before Thanksgiving, right? But so when, it's such an important point. We want to have other options besides kind of, parents will say, do I force my child to do this? And, or just say, forget it. And, and there's so many options in between, which might be, let's say, if you don't have time for a conversation, a sideline, the conversation would be, it's okay to feel scared. This is new. You don't know how it works, right? Do you want to stand and kind of watch the Ferris wheel or whatever, and just see and look at the faces? Are people happy? Are they scared? Just so a lot of times, again, just having that support, I say, you can leave the area, but try to go, stay as close as possible in a sense, so that your child can still observe how things work. Because when we know how they work, likely, that's so much better than what our imagination is telling us about how they are. So, asking a child if they want to observe, or what part seems the most scary, or how to practice a part of it. Kids practicing in their backyards, the soccer tryout, or the play or something like that. Or if you have a child who's especially socially anxious, or just new situations are difficult, going and checking out the roller skating place before the party the next week, just so they see, or looking at it online. The thing is, kids who may have anxiety, I mean, everybody has some anxiety, but their imaginations, as we said, are just so vivid, and they're always looking at the worst thing. If they look at what something is, that begins to change. You have that conversation between the two pictures, in a sense, what they're seeing. You could say, like, it's fine, it's going to be fun. that will just
That's right. Yes.
do
Yes.
nothing
Yeah.
except maybe they'll be mad that you're not hearing them or understanding.
Yes.
So I get
Yeah.
it that it's, that you're having a lot of fear. What's your worry telling you about this? What do you think? Can we fact check it? Is there something that would be helpful to do to kind of learn more about this to see? So it might be looking at something online or maybe practicing in real life.
Yeah.
And the thing about this is once you understand where you're headed with ideas like that, it doesn't have to take a whole long time. So life moves so quickly. We're all over scheduled, over this, over that, right? But once you know the kinds of things that you want to say, and you have those phrases a little bit, more front of your mind, then these things don't have to take an hour out, have a kind of a therapy session in your living room. It really doesn't have to be like that. It could be driving in the car at the kitchen table, and maybe it's like a 10-minute conversation. And
Yeah.
kids start to then learn that these situations can be solved, that you can work through your fears. You can see, what you want to keep, what not, what you need to do to practice. So it has the effect in the moment of shrinking worries
Yeah.
down to kind of the most important parts. And in the big picture, it just begins to shift the relationship. Like you were saying, doesn't have to be the enemy. It's not. It's trying to be a friend,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it shifts
Yeah.
the relationship of how you see these messages that you already kind of anticipate that you're going to know what to do to be in that conversation with with the messages that your brain is telling you.
So it sounds like if I could unpack that, there's several good things I want to make sure our listeners get out of that. One is this sense of proximity, that if a kid's saying, I don't want to do that, it's like, well, that's okay. We're not saying we need to do that, but we are going to get close to it, right? So we're going to look at that roller coaster, or we're going to go and drive over to that school, right? And maybe just look at it, because what's connected to anxiety is the imagination starts to develop this really scary worst case scenario story, right? And I think every parent can relate to that in their own personal life. And so once I can actually see what is real rather than just what I've imagined, typically that information will help the kid or the adult to start regulating that anxiety better. And they can now more realistically think about that and feel about it in a way that we can unpack, right? Then we can have these conversations. And that led to that third step of just building the skill of having those conversations, making it a normal thing, right? Instead of the skill of stuffing the anxiety, hiding it, masking it, learn how to just make it really comfortable to talk about it. And I think the hardest part for a lot of parents I work with is they're just not comfortable doing that in their marriage. They're not comfortable doing that in their own personal life, right? And so I think they're just not in the habit of befriending it and seeing it as something they can actually talk about in a way that doesn't lead to a lot of scary thoughts.
Yeah.
Because they feel like if I expose it, there's a lot of shame. Like I shouldn't be scared of that. So I might be judged for that, all that, because they probably experienced that kind of like I was a little bit as a kid at the road. It's like, why are you scared of this? You shouldn't be scared of that, And so there is some shame about it. So I'm wondering, what I'd love to hear is, do you have, like, if somebody was saying today, I want to get better, not only as a parent, but with my kids, of creating a relationship with anxiety that isn't so overwhelming. I want it to be where I'm more comfortable facing it on a daily basis. Is there some habits that somebody could start implementing today on a daily basis to just start getting more comfortable with that, or more comfortable with those conversations?
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that's such a good point. And the more that we work on that ourselves, then we'll, feel more comfortable going down those roads with our kids too. But I think, I frame this as a relationship, that the more that you can see anxiety as a messenger, just like anyone that anyone that we encounter, right? That we are going to decide what to do with that message. I work with a lot of folks with OCD, and I say that's kind of like a junk mail message or spam. It's not personal. and it's going to really help empower you to sort of understand that these are just sort of impersonal default messages that come up.
Yeah.
And OCD is a little different, but there's some ways that anxiety could fit, at least understanding that that's the warning part of the brain that we're grateful for, that it's there. If we were crossing a street and a car just came out of nowhere, that we would help that mobilization to jump back onto the sidewalk to safety. But it's always going to say the worst thing, and it's going to get there first. And if you understand that, then you can get curious, decide what you want to do. So you could even start to think like, what's my anxiety? Okay, what's my anxiety telling me here? See it in kind of two columns. You think of those in one column and then fact check in the other. What if I were talking to a friend about that? If a friend told me those things, what would I think? Would I think that was true, or would I have a different idea about it? Just you start to diminish the authority of those thoughts as soon as you think like, you can't do that. It's like, okay, my brain is telling me I can't. And part of me feels like I can't think in parts. It's another part of me have a different idea. If I were talking to a friend about this, what would I say? What's the hardest part? And is there something I can do about that? So talking to your anxiety, the Inside Out movies.
Yes, fantastic. Yeah.
Based on, really how we function, that you could think about that way, think about your emotions that way too, that they have to be in conversation with each other.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that movie, it'll be so good for parents who haven't shown their kids it, show it to them. That way then you can see it as this thing separate. I think it's so important, is that separation. So I kind of like that idea of helping kids, especially teenagers and stuff, would understand the idea of getting email. And that, I spend most of my day trashing the ones. I'm going boom, 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 just getting rid of all the ones, because you do feel anxious if you lump them all into priority. Like that's going to be way too overwhelming. But if you start getting rid of some and then you go, wait, I only have like 3 that I actually need to reply to, that's totally manageable. Right. So in the same way, like you're saying, if people can get into the habit of not seeing anxiety as an enemy, but a friend. And so when you feel anxious, it's just there trying to talk to you. So like you said, just then unpack it. What is it saying? And is this something I can just toss? Is this something that maybe I need to discuss further? Is that right? It sounds like it kind of that's the good habit to get into. And if you as a parent get into that habit, then you teach your kid daily to get into the habit. Just do that check-in on a daily basis.
I kind of crystallize this into one example that just happens all day long, which is, a child comes in or a teen comes in and says, I'm so anxious. And what are the options there? We could start to reassure it's okay, or whatever it is, or something like that, or distract, or, a third option really is to do that differentiation, to say, okay, what's your worry telling you? So that's just one thing. I mean, for parents, you would definitely want to empathize and say, okay, I get it. I have moments like that. I had that earlier today, but what's your worry saying? That helps kids know that they are not fused with their anxiety. They're not one and the same, that they can begin to kind of analyze and evaluate what those thoughts are and decide what they, need to do.
Yeah. I think that's a big step, and just something that even I forget to do that lots of times. Like I'm taking that thought right now. I think there's several clients I want to start giving that question to them, because just the way you're phrasing it is it's going to help them reflect more on it and just be more curious about it, rather than just thinking they're just going to be overtaken by it.
Yeah. I love the idea of taking that message and analyzing it, but asking the kid, what do you think of that? Like, here's the message. What do you think of that? Because it feels so empowering to me to give that kid that ability to kind of, it's almost like they're just, I imagine them almost taking the thought and looking at it like they would a toy or some puzzle or something. Right. And now they're just analyzing it and thinking, you're kind of asking them what's inside of you? What's your thought about it? Because we want to always tell them our thoughts about it. But how neat it is to ask them, what do you think about what this message is saying? And do you believe it, or do whatever that might be, but just what do they think of it? And I love the power. It to me sounds like it gives the child in that moment with the fear that's talking to them.
Absolutely. We want kids, whether it's messages on the outside, that kid said I wasn't cool. That hurts when that, but what do you think about that? It really is the kind of thing that you want them to feel empowered, whether it's inner messages or things happening on the outside, that they're ultimately the one who decides what the meaning is of the things that, happen within and around them.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Chansky, this conversation has been so good, and we could spend so much more time talking to you about all the different types of OCD stuff, all those different things. But if our listeners are saying, hey, I want to know more about how to dive into this, discussion about anxiety, how could they find out more about your work?
So, and it's just been such a pleasure, and I feel like we could do another round. So we'll see. Yeah, maybe we'll go again, but that was just wonderful to talk together. So my website, tamarchansky.com, there I've written years and years of blog posts there. And so there's a great search function if you have an anxiety about perfection. Perfection is school anxiety, sleep anxiety. Just put it in the search. There's probably a post about it.
Great.
So there are a lot of resources there. My books are there. For those on Instagram, you can put the handle Tamar Chansky PhD.
Yes, that's awesome. And we'll put all that in our show notes. So once again, thank you for taking the time with us to discuss this very important topic to so many families all throughout the world. And I hope this empowered every parent to see anxiety and fear differently in themselves and in their kids. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
The Art of Raising Humans podcast should not be considered or used as counseling, but for educational purposes only.